So welcome. We're live on Facebook. Welcome to those on the back end on Zoom. If you have any questions during today's webinar, feel free to put them in the chat and I will be watching that. And for those of you on the Facebook, LabCoatAgents, welcome. We have our good friend, Wesley Rocha here today to talk about hiring the most profitable assistant ever. So if you are someone who looks to potentially grow or scale a team or just grow and scale your business, and you know that you cannot possibly do it by yourself and you need to hire an assistant, you need to listen today. And if you have assistants and maybe you feel like, crap, I wish I could get more out of them. I wish I could feel like I'm getting a better ROI. What could I be doing better to make them more efficient? Or you just need to hire more. This is for you too. In other words, this is for pretty much everyone. So Wesley, welcome, my friend. I believe you're going to reveal some big mistakes that agents are making right now when hiring assistants. So that's going to be exciting. But before we do that, why don't you just introduce yourself? I know our audience knows you, but maybe somebody doesn't. So do that first.
Well, if you don't know me, no, I was kidding.
Then you're living under a rock.
No, I was kidding. So my name is Wesley Rocha. I'm founder and CEO of LinkU. LinkU, basically, we have a platform which I like to call the ultimate follow-up machine. So that's what we do. We help people build follow-up systems and stuff within our platform so they can keep in touch and keep those relationships nice and warm to create referrals and repeat business and higher conversions over and over again. So that's the short version, I guess.
Awesome. And so, let's talk. So then let's dive right in. So obviously you have a lot of experience with this. You run a successful business. You work with real estate agents every single day. So let's digress for a second and say, at what point, first of all, would you tell an agent that it's time to hire your first or additional assistants?
Yeah, so typically when it comes to hiring an assistant, right? A lot of times the agents are thinking about all these different things that, they're not getting done and things they'd like to get done. And then like kind of passing that off to the assistant. Some of the stuff is things that like, oh, I don't really want to do this stuff, but I know it needs to get done. They want to pass that stuff off to an assistant. And really, like, people end up, I would say agents end up working like so many more hours before they ever even start thinking about an assistant. And what I wanted to kind of cover in this training or this webinar is basically talk about some other things that maybe you might not be thinking about in regards to, you might want to hire an assistant earlier than you might think. Or if you are thinking of hiring an assistant, kind of rethinking the tasks that they're going to be doing. And that's probably one of the biggest delays or fears, is making sure that there's going to be a return on investment. Like, how am I going to pay this person if I hire them? And just kind of making that jump, I guess, is probably the most difficult step for them. But in any case, how do you know you're ready for assistant? Well, that's actually, we'll probably cover a lot of that during this whole training. But I would say if you have, I'll give you a few different things. One is if you're working more hours than you should be, meaning beyond a 8-hour day, and you're just working into the night 6 days a week, 7 days a week, and who knows how many hours, right? You're probably going to need some help because you're working beyond the typical boundaries. And the idea, I'm guessing for most of you as an agent, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you decided to be an agent, were you like wanting to work 6-7 days a week? Did you want to work 12 hours a day? Like, if that's what you wanted to do and that was kind of like your whole expectation, then sure. But most of you probably got in real estate because you're thinking like you get more freedom because you're setting your own schedule, and you show some houses here and there, and it's kind of turned maybe into the opposite. So seeing that, And if you've been an agent for a long time, what's happened is it's warped your reality of like, no, I have to work this many hours. So if you're working beyond the hours where when you first got into it, then you wanted to, then you might need some kind of an assistant. Another another thing that I would say is your database. So if you have a database that's probably, I would say over like a few hundred, maybe 200, 300, probably closer to 300, 400 and higher, whether they be old leads, whether they be past clients, whether they be, anything like that, you probably should have an assistant, and their focus would probably be like just keeping in touch with these people. I'm going to go into all these things as we go through the training, but that would be their focus, is really running the follow-up systems. And those are probably the two, I would say, biggest things when it comes to having an assistant. If you're thinking you need an assistant to do things so that, errands and running around with laundry, walking your dog, stuff like that, probably not. And we'll get into some other options there, but those will be the main reasons.
Let me ask you the one biggest objection that I think most people have, and I do as well. When it comes to scaling, you're always questioning yourself as to, can I afford it?
Right.
And it doesn't matter if this is assistant number one or like I'm just going to use myself as an example. We've got about 100 employees, and I'm still questioning. I need another assistant right now, and I'm questioning, damn, can I afford it? Well, obviously the answer is, it's obviously there's probably one broad answer for all of us. Doesn't matter if you're making tons of money or you feel like you can't afford it because you're squeaking by. Right. How do you answer that objection of get out of your own damn way and hire the person?
Yeah. So usually this comes to, the biggest issue is not understanding the return on investment, or really kind of having a plan for what they're going to do. So let's say you bring them on, you're probably thinking, well, first I have to have time to train this person. So I'm going to have to spend who knows what time training them on these things. And some of the times what you actually want your assistant to do, where you'd actually get the most help, is to do things that you don't know how to do. So there's kind of like two assistants. You have like assistants who kind of could do the more like entering contacts or, sending out stuff. They're very standard things that you could teach anyone and so forth. And so it kind of saves you some time. And then you have the other one, which is really, you're like, wow, if I could have somebody to do this and do this, which are really going to be your more higher ROI things. The issue is like, who's going to train this person? Because even you may not know the answer to that stuff. But typically, as far as getting started, if you don't have one already, the easiest thing to do is probably start with something part-time, something like dipping your toe in the water, right? And then kind of easing that. If you already have this, like about, oh, should I need another one? To me, I would say, look, you really got to inventory, what is it that they're going to be doing? Some of the stuff you're going to have them be doing, like, honestly, a lot of those things could be just X'd out. They don't need to be done. So one of the biggest mistakes people make is hiring an assistant to do things that are low ROI. They take things off your plate, but they're things off your plate that never should have been on anyone's plate. So that's a huge thing to consider.
Give me an example. Give me an example of that.
Well, let's say this is an easy one, because this is very common. A lot of times agents will be like, oh, I need an assistant I want them to email my newsletter, or I want them to post stuff on my Facebook page. And so this is just one of the tasks. And because right now I'm posting stuff on my Facebook, or I don't have time to post on my Facebook. Well, to me, posting stuff on your Facebook, the stuff that your assistant's going to post for you, like going to Canva and creating random things and just doing that, that's a super waste of money. Shouldn't be on anybody's plate. And what I mean by that is, again, people going in and just creating stuff in Canva, or creating general stuff, or sharing articles just so there's something on your Facebook business page. I mean, really nothing's going to happen from that, because your business page doesn't get any, organic reach anyway. And the content isn't like super high quality, so it's not going to get much reach, sharing articles, stuff like that. So for something like that, you can hire a company to do probably 30, 40 bucks a month. You don't need an assistant to do that. That's just one example. There's many things similar to that where it's like you're doing this thing because you're like, oh, if I could just do it more, then I'll make more or something will happen. But really, even if you do more of it, and and a lot of times, again, the only way more of it works is if it's a like much higher level quality, like Jeff's stuff. But if you're doing it at a lower level quality or just to get it done, then you're not going to get ROI from it. And so people have done this or think tasks like that. And because they do it and there's no ROI, then they're off and they're like, that was the easiest thing I can do. And that's one that comes to my head just because it's most common, but there's a lot of examples just like that people do all the time.
Awesome. Let's get into it. Let's get into where do you want to go from here? Do you want to get right into the mistakes that agents are making?
Yeah. So yeah, we covered a couple of them already. So really, I guess let's go with that first. Let's go with this last mistake that I talked about, which is the ROI and how you can kind of work on figuring that out. One of the biggest things, like if you think about, I wonder if anyone knows this, like in your real estate business right now, does anyone have a clue, like what would be the biggest ROI that you have available that you're not leveraging in your business right now?
That's a good question. I wonder how many people actually have diagnosed or, assessed this deeply in their own business.
Yeah, maybe they feel already like, man, I know that this is worth so much. I'm just not able to do it. Like, what is that thing? Anyone want to? Wait, I mean, don't all post your comments too quickly now.
Well, why don't you do this? Why don't you use an example of somebody that you've heard? Well, there you go. David chimed in.
I was hoping to. Sometimes you do that and you get some participation.
There we go. Here we go.
All right, so so lead generation for listings, warm leads, call SOI. So please keep those coming. Please keep them coming because they're gonna, especially if you're wondering, maybe you're thinking like, well, I'm thinking of hiring someone for this. What is that? What is that you think that is going to be your highest ROI? So one of the mistakes that people or agents make when they're hiring an assistant is they have this assistant to do kind of, again, they'll find random things for them to do, not really properly train them because they don't have anything documented. That's a whole nother story. Actually, that's probably mistake number 2. But what they'll do is they'll have them call their leads. And unfortunately, when you have your assistant calling leads or SOI and stuff like that, depending on the assistant, unless they're trained or they have a sales mind or they have something there to handle objections and whatnot, you're not going to have very good results. So I've seen a lot of people hire assistants to basically do this, and they don't have a way to train them. They don't have a way to monitor how they're doing. They don't have a way to sorry, my son walked in and threw me off my train of thought. But anyway, so what they'll do is they'll have them call their leads because it's something they hate doing. A lot of people, not necessarily hate, they just don't have time. And it's one of those things they really prefer not to do. So they're like, I want to outsource making calls.
Yeah. Follow-up. It looks to me like a lot of these answers are really going back to follow-up. Leads, SOI, it's follow-up. Zillow leads, it's follow-up.
Yeah. And so when you put an assistant in charge of that, all right, when you put an assistant in charge of that, then what ends up happening is they don't really do a good job. And I've had many agents do this. And then you kind of like, oh, well, those leads aren't good or this and that, whatever. And then you never really get into the deeper to figure out like this person can't handle the most common objection, which is just like, oh, no, I'm not interested or I'm not looking or literally any objection that if you were on the phone, that you would probably be like, nothing, that's nothing, right? And even some of you agents struggle with some of the objections. So if you struggle, imagine the assistant. So that's one mistake that I would say is probably, unless they're properly trained, unless they're like, that was like their thing, like an inside sales agent, ISA type of position, your assistant is not an ISA, and everyone wants to do they want their assistant to also be the ISA. They want their assistant to also do this and do this. So it doesn't really work that way. Okay, an ISA is kind of a very special thing, and that's when you handle objections and to be a salesperson. The second mistake would be not knowing what they're going to do. So, and this is also keeping from hiring. So the second mistake is like, okay, you finally hire them, but you never really took the time to train them, or you kind of just like, well, just watch this or watch over me for a little bit and you'll kind of get the hang of it. That works a lot better when you guys are in office next to each other and they can take things off your plate. Works terribly for any kind of remote assistant whatsoever. So a remote assistant, if they don't have specific, especially if you're going like outsourced to VA, like virtual VAs or Philippines, things like that, you really have to have it down, like what they're going to be doing, very specific. So to do that, I'll give you a solution to kind of solve that, is start making a list of what is it that you're doing right now when you're doing your day. Like, oh, you know what? I can have a remote person do this, or maybe a local assistant. Like, start categorizing what, like, do you have to do it? Like, does it have to be you? And if the answer is no, then who can do it? And what would they need to know? So what I did was I just started inventorying that. I recommend, this is what I teach my agents. It's like, start inventorying these. And then once you get enough things on there, I like to review them with them, because we like to pick out these things. No one needs to do this. Just take that off the list. No one needs to do this. It's like no ROI. They take that off the list. But once you have a good solid list of those things that are actually high ROI, they're actually going to save you time, and they need to be done, all that kind of stuff, then I'll say, okay, now you go ahead and hire an assistant. You don't have to hire them full time right out of the gate either. You can do part-time, you can work out hourly things like that. So that way you're not on the hook for, this $40,000 a year salary or whatever it may be. You can just be like, okay, work Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you could pay them $18 an hour, and the check isn't much. It's a few $100s a week, if that, right? So that's one idea. Or not one idea. One mistake is the not being ready, not having the training, not documenting.
Would you say though that has a lot to do with really just taking a step back and itemizing what it is you the agent are doing on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? So like, what is taking up your time? Because I would argue, I might be wrong here, but I think that you want to hire an assistant to do, again, the non money making activity, like staying on top of your email, for example. Like, that's not money making activity. Replying to the important emails is money making activity. Staying on top of contacting your SOI is money making activity. So would you say that unless you're in a position to hire somebody, unless you're really good at it and can train somebody to be as good as you, that mistake could be, I'm going to hire somebody to follow up with my SOI. And if they're not a good follow-up person, if they're not eloquent, if they can't, they don't have some sales ability, you're actually probably going to be doing your business a detriment than you are, helping it.
Yeah, because then you're paying the assistant and you're not getting a result. And so that's why you're like, well, this doesn't work. Like, so many agents give up on their assistants. And because this is a story that, oh yeah, I hired assistant, it didn't work out. Oh, I did this, it didn't work out. It's just because it was done wrong, and they did kind of what you're saying. They put this person on stuff they don't really like to do, they don't have time for. And they didn't really categorize. They didn't take inventory on really what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing, which brings us to that brings us to mistake number 3, which is putting your assistant on high ROI tasks, which are things you should be doing, basically, right? Yes, they should be doing low return on investment. Take that back. They should be doing things that allow you to get the highest return on investment off your time. They just said it perfectly. That's how you need to do it. And a lot of times people don't really take an account to what those things are going to be. They don't really plan that out. And so that's why a lot of people have trouble with the assistants, and they kind of give up. And Just like, oh, I'll just do it myself because they did this wrong or they did that. Yeah, of course. They didn't do it to that level because they didn't have the training. You might have the wrong tasks. You're stronger at that than they are. And you might be working on the wrong things. You might need to swap some tasks with them, stuff like that. There was something else I was going to throw in there. What I was going to say was, sometimes this kind of falls in, like, for example, transaction coordinator. Sometimes we'll hire assistant to be the transaction coordinator. Mm-hmm. It's probably just better to hire a transaction coordinator as a transaction coordinator because you're just paying. That's an easy way. That's like this is the easiest way to get help. So first off, if I'm talking with an agent and they don't have a transaction coordinator, that's like the first step. It's like, okay, just get that because you're only committed per transaction usually, right? So you pay per transaction and that's one step. Then the next step is maybe getting an assistant to help with those things. But again, you're going to want to inventory those first. You're not going to want to just jump in. Now, let's get back into that follow-up because I want to look at some of these.
Well, before you do, David had a question about hiring recommend hiring for transaction management. And I think the answer is yes, David. I mean, that's the paperwork stuff. That's not making it rain. That's just pushing, the train down the tracks when you've already made it rain. And so those are the types of things that you should really focus on. Here's the thing with realtors, you guys are rainmakers. You are the ones who bring in the business. So if you're not focusing your time and attention on things that bring in new business, then you are in the weeds and you got to get out of the weeds. And that's the whole point of, I think, what you're trying to convey today, right?
Yeah, exactly. So let's see, they say some of the things, so the guess on what's the highest ROI you should be doing, warm leads, call us white. Well, Jeff named it, right? And some of you guys named it here. The highest ROI for you guys to be doing is to be doing the follow-up, to be making the initial maybe reach out or even having hot transfers if it's new leads or calling your database. Like just calling your past clients, your sphere of influence is probably your highest ROI because those that go underserved currently. And if you really were to master the follow-up and master, you only really need a database of maybe, if you had a strong database of like 100 to 200 people, like you can do a home a week, like no problem. You can do a home a week, no problem, literally referrals only. The reason being is because even if you sold half of that, 20 transactions a year, 20 of those, on average, you should have 2 to 3 additional transactions from each one. So just right there alone, just in that year alone, you should be way above there. But most agents, if you probably did a survey here, have probably done the same amount of number of sales and transactions, even with COVID and prior to COVID, the last 3 or 4 years have probably been about the same with give or take a couple of transactions. And the reason for that is because either you've hit your bandwidth because you're working on the wrong things or you don't have the help or whatever, but you basically hit the bandwidth or of your knowledge or whatnot, whatever. There's multiple reasons of why. But you're basically stuck at this plateau. And the only way to get through is, I know this sounds crazy. A lot of people are like, well, if I got more leads, if my leads were better, if Zillow didn't do this and Zillow didn't do, like, there's all these excuses of all these reasons of why you're not growing each year. But really, every agent that I've worked with, and I've worked with a lot, digging into that, what it all came down to was the follow-up. I know it's like, so it seems so simple and so whatever, but really think about this. I'm going to just kind of lay out a scenario for you. So if you are handling the highest value task, which is your follow-up, let's just say reaching out to your past clients, reaching out to sphere of influence, things like that. Not just them, but also vendors or people you work with. And not just them, but I have some agents, they have other agents on their follow-up. And it's funny about that in this kind of market. Do you think that has come in handy? Yeah. So those agents who have previous relationships and really they don't just talk to agents during a deal. They just network with agents just to know who's in the area and who does what and who does this. So when that comes up, the offer, like, oh yeah, you're basically friends. And so it helps. I'm not saying, I'm saying it helps. It can help. But also your vendors, all that kind of stuff. So when you're connecting with a past client or someone in your sphere, and this guy does roofing, and this guy has, who knows, all these people do a million different things, okay? And as you're connecting, these people are like, oh man, yeah, I'm having this problem. You will, because it's a relationship business, you're being the master of relationships and networking, you're able to connect these. Oh, let me connect you to this person. Let me connect you to this person. This guy. Oh, I know a guy who does this. I know some of you guys have like that person who's just really good at it. And they always have a guy like for everything. Oh, my car, I hit it. Oh, I got a guy, he does car. Oh, I got a guy, he does it. I have a friend like that. He has hookups with all that stuff. And when you do that, what happens is he's connecting people. Those people want to pay it back and they want to connect to you too. So when they say, oh, I have someone who wants to sell their house. Oh, I have someone. And it's just a momentum builder. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And you're not really having to work for it. It doesn't matter what Zillow's doing or any of these other people are doing. It doesn't matter. Because just in your own little bubble, you're getting as many transactions as you can handle. And I'm sure some of you may be in here who have that. And that's why you're here, because you're busy. So you're just looking to save time. You have more business than you can take on. You just need more time. And that's one problem to have. And some of you are here because you are spending a ton of time. You would love to do more business because you're not making enough. You're not at the income levels maybe that you want to be. So, I guess that's kind of like my full thought on that whole thing. When you go into your database, that whole kind of scenario, and it doesn't take much. Just 100, 200 people. If you master that thing, your income is growing every single year. And then you can hire 2 or 3 assistants or whatever.
Well, what about, so, when it comes to, your SOI, your follow-up leads, I think the thing you want to hire an assistant for is to be setting up automation, is to be making sure things are firing. It's to be adding in new customers every time you get a new client. That's what you want them doing, but you need to be the one picking up the phone and making those warm touches. Because if you're not doing that, then right. You're basically saying, hey, Susie assistant or Joe assistant, you're responsible for my paycheck. And I don't know how many of you are willing to pass that off to some assistant. I don't think you are. And so think through what it is you can have them do so you can spend more time doing what I just described. But right. So Wesley, when it comes to, let's just use this. Zach asked the question, when it comes to old Zillow leads, would you hire an ISA or just a regular, I don't know what that even means really, a regular assistant, just a normal assistant? And I think it depends on the skill set. I'll let you answer it, but I'm curious to know, how would you even establish or determine if just a normal assistant has the skill set to do that type of follow-up?
So typically a normal assistant would not have the skills to do follow-up on old Zillow leads. So I would definitely go with an ISA in that case. The issue you run into there is you may not have enough leads to keep that ISA busy constantly. So I feel like you need probably 1,000, 2,000 leads or more probably of older leads to keep that person busy, maybe daily or whatnot. But what we like to do, or what you may be able to do, is kind of hybrid that. So what I'm thinking is, instead, having this person or this assistant would essentially be running my follow-up sequences or my automations, right? So, or making the outbound calls, whatever it may be. But really what it comes down to is making sure that they're going to have the workload. So that's one thing. Again, who was asked the question? Zachary? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say, Zachary, it depends how many leads you have. Definitely. Because if you only have 300 old Zillow leads, then, they should be able to call 20, 30 a day, maybe more, probably more.
He's got a few hundred, he said.
Yeah, so it definitely wouldn't make sense, I think. I think for you, I'll give you an example. Maybe you guys could use this strategy. This is what we do. So what we do is we set up a campaign. It's like a follow-up campaign in LinkU, and I just put 3 events in there. I put an email, I put a voicemail drop, like a recording, and then I put a text message. And then I just basically send these out per day to like 25 people. And it basically works through the list. Now, obviously, I'm using LinkU, so that part's automatic. But if you had an assistant, that's what they would be doing, is they would be basically taking the list of 400, putting it there, sending it. And that way you wouldn't need an ISA. You would have your assistant do that. And it's really like the email's coming from you, the text is coming from you, the voicemail's coming from you. And all the assistant would be doing at this point is when they return, when the person returns the call or replies to the email or replies to the text, they're just simply connecting you to that. So they're not having to be on the phone. They're not having to actually be doing the interactions. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how we do it on a smaller database. If you had a much larger, then it would make sense to have an ISA that just dealt with that, with new leads and old leads. And then you would have an assistant handling all the automation, the ongoing nurturing, and all that kind of stuff.
Or in a situation like what he just described, what about, hiring the assistant to have, if you have multiple tasks that they can, that you can give them throughout the course of a day or a week, then you can use them to do multiple things, like checking your email, like doing transaction management, like following up on leads, right? I mean, do you recommend that?
Yeah, that's kind of the idea is, if they're just kind of like, see, if you have more likely, most of you have, a few hundred leads, you have you're not going to have thousands, right? And so you don't need them to necessarily be, like Jeff said, spending all day doing that. So they can be doing this, they can be doing that, can be doing this. But I'll give you kind of a list of things, okay? Just some ideas of what they would be doing. These would be some of the high dollar things. It comes to your database. So they'd help you like organize it. That would be key. Like what could be done to organize it? Make sure all your past clients are organized. Okay. Make sure they're all in the right categories. Making sure that as you talk to people, because this is something I see a lot of agents talk to people. They don't add any notes anywhere. They don't update the CRM or anything like that. So maybe have an assistant, you could like get them to do that, or they can help you to make sure it's all in order so you can feel like that's an easy thing. So that would be key, is just getting that database in order, because the database is literally like the most valuable thing that you have, right? Another thing would be managing the calendar. That's huge. So setting up the calendar, maybe helping to manage that so that you know who you should be calling. So a lot of times, you just look at all this data, you have a sphere of influence, you have past clients, you're like, well, I don't know who should I be calling or when or what, and you lose track and all that stuff. So the assistant would basically be helping to keep that as a plan. So when you wake up in the morning, you've got 5 or 6 people on your list that you just call at some point throughout the day. It doesn't have to be at a specific time, they're not appointments. You're just texting, or you're calling, or you're doing something personal to reach out to them 5 a day. And then you're doing that consistently every single day that you're working, Monday through Friday, unless you're on vacation or something. And that they're almost putting that task list in front of you. They're the ones figuring out who's on the list and who should be, just putting them there so you don't have to figure out, oh, did I call this person already? You're not spending your time doing that. You just have a list of the 5 people you need to call. That's it. You get that done. So having that handled for you is really huge, really huge. This one's a little tougher to get, and that's like a lot of the agents struggle with technical, and this is why I think this is one of the biggest issues you might run into. I would kind of look for someone who's maybe more tech savvy than I am. Not me, because I'm very tech savvy.
But how do you find that person? Because we've got a couple of questions, like where do you go find these assistants? How do you find them? How do you assess them? Do you recommend personality tests, for example? There's several comments on that. There's another comment from Chris about he's struggling to figure this out, and he's going on his 4th assistant, and he's admitted, like I've failed at providing clear expectations, but maybe it's because the process to finding the right personality for what your needs are is not there. So what do you recommend? Where do you find people? How do you assess if they're the right fit for you?
I mean, that's a great question. Where do you find them? Well, I'll say where I've heard some of the people have had success is people they like that have worked as an agent, but didn't like a lot of people who get into being a real estate agent don't realize that they're getting into like having their own business.
Mm-hmm.
There are agents that are good at doing agent stuff, but they're just really bad at running a business, which might be some of you, but hopefully not. But those agents, and then what's going to happen is they're like, like I love it, but I'm going to just go do something else, right? I'm just going to work for Zillow or Redfin or something. So something like that you can get as possibly an assistant. It just depends. Like, yeah, you do want to know a little bit about their personality or like what's important to them. So I always ask people, like, I want to know, like, what are their plans over the next 5 years? I want to know, like, how is this going to be of value to them? Like, how is this job going to be of value to them? If what they want to ultimately be is like some completely different thing, has nothing to do with being an assistant for me, then I usually stray away from that because I want them to be like, they want to be a real estate agent. So, or you may even want to find, like, if I was going to find someone, if I was doing it, this is how I do it for myself. And this is how I recommend people do it. I find people because I'm cheap. So I want to pay the cheapest possible. So I like to draft and develop. That's my strategy. Okay. Because if you go after experienced assistants or people who already are very successful at this, they're going to be more expensive. It does shortcut the process, but they're more expensive. There are VAs. So there's like, aren't you involved with a real estate or like they do assistance or something, Jeff?
Tristan and them are, yeah, there actually is a website for that. And we're connected with, can't even think of the name of it off the top of my head, but I'll think of it and I'll say it.
Like, don't they like vet the assistants?
Yeah, they find VAs, and that's actually a great idea right there. Sandra, actually, if you want to put a link to, Virtue Desk. There you go. Thank you. I knew she would come through. VAs, and that was mentioned earlier, is virtual assistants are a phenomenal source, and there are there are a bunch of platforms. Virtue Desk is the one that we work closely with at LabCoats, but they are the ones doing the vetting for you. And so, yeah, I would highly recommend checking out. Pavel's the one who owns that. That's the name I was thinking of. But yeah, Tristan's a big fan. Tristan has 10 million VAs, Sandra leading the way. And so that's a great answer to that question.
Yeah, so so that's one way you can do it too, is they're already vetted, they're already kind of, and there's some that are, I don't know if they train them, some of them pre-train them on a lot of the more common tasks, things like that. There's also realestateassistants.com. Someone was involved with that. But so there's multiple places that do that kind of stuff. And those are going to be, again, helping manage CRMs, this and that, whatever. So that's a good way. But what I do is I draft and develop. If you're looking for someone locally to actually be local because they have to go do things, unlock doors, or who knows what, then I draft and develop. So I'm looking for someone who is in real estate school, or they want to be a real estate agent, or they're studying to be, or something, or they're super, super new. So, maybe I can train them or bring my wing and give them a little more responsibility, that allows me to build almost like a mini team. I wouldn't do it necessarily right out of the gate, but it allows me to train somebody or work with someone who actually is interested in this because they want to do that later. And whether they go do that on their own later, or maybe better yet, if I get them into a position where they can be an agent for me, more like a partner than an assistant, even though they start more as an assistant, then I've basically started building a little bit of a mini team, which means I could go on vacation. Mm-hmm. So that's the way like I would do it. And I've done it in my company and my business. I don't sell real estate, but any business that basically I've worked with, this is the way that I've had them do it. Draft and develop, cheaper.
What about a list? Because we're running short on time. Do you have a list of assistant worthy tasks that you share, or that you have, or a place they can go to get this?
That's a good question. I was thinking about, I should have a list of tasks that they can do. So I don't, but I'll probably email something out. We get the emails for everyone here, so we'll email something out once I have it. So one other thing too, and this is something that's been helpful for some people, is, and this is actually why I created this, because I have a lot of agents that I work with who are like, they have our platform, they're using LinkU or they're using whatever, and they're like, well, I just don't have time. I don't have time to do calls. I don't know who I should be calling. I don't know, this and that, whatever. Sometimes they like to do the greeting cards. They don't like, haven't had time to do that. I don't do it. I like to do it. When's the last time you talked to your past clients? Oh, it's been a little while. All these different things. What about your reviews? Are you getting reviews? Oh yeah, here and there, but then they say they'll do it and then they don't, and I don't have time to follow up with that. And there's literally a million other things. And then obviously there's social media to do it right. Yeah, how you do that. And all these tasks that are going to have the best, I guess, return on investment, your highest return on investment, which is basically becoming top of mind, your past clients, creating conversations, putting you on the phone with either older leads or past clients or your SOI, your sphere, whoever it may be, requires a bit more of a technical skill is what I found. And so when it comes to all the follow-up stuff, that's why I was like, okay, I'm just going to create a way to do this. So I did end up creating a program where we basically handle all of the follow-up stuff. So it's kind of like having an assistant, but who masters the follow-up, like they're follow-up genius. They have like awesome technology. They come with awesome technology that they know how to use and are expert at. And all of the technology team behind them, like a Facebook expert, or this expert, that expert, that expert. Because it would just be too expensive to get someone or find an assistant to do these things, to do that highest ROI. The highest ROI is your database. But it's also a little more complex than simply, it can be more complex if you want to use some of the more digital stuff and the, retargeting and all this other technology you can do to do it with an assistant. Now you can do a lot of the old school stuff. You can still do like the letters, you can do the emails, you can do stuff like that. And you can absolutely make that work. But basically what I did is put together a program for that. So I think they were posting a link in the chat. If that's something you're interested in, check that out for sure. I think there's a video on there. There's more information on that page. It is an application only, so we only work with so many people like at any given time. I think we'll probably have spots coming up in the next couple of weeks or so. So if that is something you're interested in, just fill out the application and we can see if that's a good fit. And you can work with me and my team to basically run your follow-up for you. But that's kind of like, honestly, Jeff, as I've been working with agents, I have agents that are like, I'm going to hire an assistant. It's like, dude, it's been like 7 months. You haven't hired an assistant yet. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, look, why don't we do this? The most important thing you can be doing is follow your database, right? Like, well, yeah. I'm like, okay, so what if we just start there, right? Now we don't have to worry about the hire. You don't have to worry about the hiring, finding someone, running all the different challenges. Mm-hmm. We'll just run the follow-up, which is going to be your highest performing, highest ROI thing, connecting you, getting you on the phone, creating conversations, getting you in front of everyone, running your social media, all these different things. Everything we do appears as if it comes from the agent. It's not us doing on their behalf, because us on their behalf doesn't work. It's everything we do is like as if the agent's doing it. So it's like an extension of them. It's giving them a duplicate of them essentially. And finally, he's like, fine, I'll do that. It's like 7 months, maybe longer, to finally make a move. And so that's kind of where I'm at. That's what I'm doing with this. So that's why I thought I'd do this thing, just because so many people have trouble with the assistant thing.
Well, I think there's a lot of people on here too that are probably kicking themselves. Even Chris, this is something to check out, man. it's obviously, if you've struggled to find or hire the right people, maybe not hiring the right people and hiring the right service might be the right avenue for you. I do want to mention that you mentioned putting together a list. So if you do that, Those of you that have asked for that list or you put your email in the chat, we already have your email if you are on the Zoom side. So it'll automatically go out to you. So look out for that. So Wesley, I would suggest definitely doing that.
Yeah,
One last, what's that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And somebody just asked, where's the link? It's in the chat. Sandra, if you can post it one more time. The link is been posted by Sandra in there. It's right above Dario, right above your question right there. So you can see it there. And as well, Sandra, will you put it in the Facebook post? So if you go back to rewatch this, you go back to grab it from the LabCoatAgents Facebook group, we'll put the link there. Last question, Wesley. From a CRM perspective, this is the $1 trillion question that gets asked 1 trillion times, but a good one. What CRM do you recommend?
Well, the CRM is the one that, it's the same answer everyone's going to give you, right? The best CRM is the one that you use. So you want it to be easy. You want it to be something that you can easily go in and make the updates, make the changes, and just honestly, the most important thing is like, you can find contacts easily, you can add them easily, you can add notes, things like that. I would say like, oh, you could do follow campaigns and all this stuff, but no one ever sets that crap up. So as long as it did these basic things. Our system has all that stuff. It has all the follow campaigns and stuff. But again, the reason I did this is because I don't know how many clients, they would sign up for the thing. And please say, that's me if this is you. They sign up, they buy the CRM system with the follow-up and all the drip emails and everything else, and they just don't use it. Or they use the CRM, but they don't use the other stuff, or they buy it, they sit on it, they never log in, and they're just on with their day, right? They're just so busy. Does anyone else do that in here? Probably.
I guarantee it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the other reason why I was like, you know what? If we just create a service, and I was really hesitant to do it, but I was like, this is the direction I'm going to go. We're just going to create a service. We just freaking help them. We set up the whole CRM. We just do all of it, manage the whole thing. It's like the ROI is ridiculous. And the way I look at it is like, I'm almost going to start recommending people do this before they even go to the assistant, maybe, because of and this goes so much to what I'm saying, what Chris said. Right? I think, was it Chris or someone else? I think it was Chris, someone who had said they hired the assistant on the fourth one. For that reason exactly, is like, I want assistants so I get more time in ROI. And he spent all this time. It's like, dude, like, just do this, just do that. Anyway, yeah, click there if you think it's something that might be a fit. You can put the application. You and I can set up a call and basically determine. You're not signing up. You're just fine. We're just having a conversation to see if this even makes sense for you, whether you should get an assistant, whether it makes sense to start here, or like what your direction should be. So anyway, yeah, that's all I got.
Love it. Thank you guys for being on today. Remember, if you're struggling in any area of your business, you don't like doing something, you feel like you're not spending enough time making it rain, this is where you need a platform like Wesley's. This is a time when you might need an assistant. And don't forget that, you know what, when you're hiring that assistant, maybe check out their personality, run disc profiles. If you need somebody who's going to be analytical and running spreadsheets, well, then you don't need a D. You don't need an I, right? You need to know what you need. And that's how you establish these things. And obviously people like Wesley are already trying to find ways to correct this problem for the industry. So go check out the link. It's in the chat. It's going to be gone here in about 30 seconds. So make sure you copy and paste it and keep an eye out. Wesley, make sure you put that list together, email it out to everybody here, because I'm sure you'll include your contact info in the link again there.
One more thing. Some people ask, like, well, I already have an assistant, or if I get an assistant, would I also have your platform and the assistant? And the answer is yes. We actually have several people in this program who have an assistant, and the assistant actually works with us to get the most out of everything. And that's because the assistants, generally, the ones I've been working with, they're great at doing all the other tasks that agent needs to do, like this, that, paperwork, everything else that they have them doing that help them get more time. And then we take that whole technology piece and we just kind of make it simple. So it just all happens in the background for the agent. So absolutely, you can combine them. You don't have to choose one or the other. It's just, if you've been sitting there for months or maybe even years thinking about assist, I haven't done it, this might be a good first step to get, put your toe in the water before you commit, because there's no contract or you don't have to feel bad because you're firing someone or something if you don't make enough money or something. That's where no one wants to fire anyone if they don't make enough. That's why they don't want to hire an assistant a lot of times. That's one thing.
True.
Anyway.
Well, good stuff. Thank you, Wesley, for being on today. Thank you guys for being on as well. And we'll see you on the next one.
All right. See you later, guys. Have a good one. Bye.